All right. Thanks for joining me for my introduction to the book of Job. I hope you'll stay to the end or until my voice wears out. We'll see which it is. But the book of Job is an important contribution to the canon because it helps to at least put into perspective for us some of the struggles that mankind faces. Sometimes our suffering seems all out of proportion to any kind of sin that we might have accomplished. And so we want to take a look at what Job adds to the discussion there. Um, First kind of thing we should probably take care of at the beginning is what date does this book purport? Where does it fit in our basic stages? And because of a couple of things, people think that most commentators think it dates back to the patriarchal period. The reason we say that is because Job has a strong patriarchal presence. His family suffers because he suffers, and he offers sacrifices for his family just in case they may have sinned. It's a picture of Job's incredible righteousness. And when he offers sacrifices, it is done without condemnation. So that would be the kinds of sacrifices that maybe Melchizedek offers outside of the Levitical system that will come later. So that's why we're dating it, Job, clear back to the patriarchal period, which means, of course, that man has been struggling with the issue of suffering for a long time. And now let's see what we learn from the book of Job. We could ask a bunch of different questions, and then we'll see how well Job answers them, or at least puts them into perspective. Questions like, why do people suffer? Why does God allow the suffering? Why is suffering disproportionate, that somebody who appears to serve God can suffer worse than somebody who is openly disobedient? How does suffering relate to our sin? Are they proportionate? Is God powerful? And if he is, why is there suffering? Or if he's good, why is there suffering? See, it's a double-edged sword sort of thing. So Job is going to take up in pretty incredible detail the topic of suffering and maybe help us with our perspective. The structure of the book of Job comes in a couple of different ways. It's prose at the beginning and at the end. That's the story of Satan talking with God, and then it's the story of God's answer to Job concerning his friends at the end. So the prose is at the beginning and the end of the book, and in the middle there is poetic dialogue. The dialogue comes from Job's three friends, and then Job's response. His three friends are Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar, and there are basically three rounds. After each speech, there is usually some kind of response from Job. After the dialogue, there is one more speech. It is the speech of Elihu. He describes himself as a young man with many words. And he's not mentioned anywhere else. He's not mentioned in the prose section before or after. It appears that he's a transitional figure to help us move from the dialogue that the three friends have been offering to God's response on the matter of suffering. So he may be that bridge, that transitional figure in between. Let's talk about the story then. At the beginning, Satan is pictured as wandering throughout the earth and then coming to give an account of his actions before God. And God asks Satan, have you considered my servant Job? So God is pointing out his faithful servant. And Satan says, well, people will just serve God for what they can get. So God gives permission to Satan for him to take away what Job has. So he loses his wealth, he loses his sons and his daughters. Everything is swept away. And by the end of round one, in Job's losses, Job is without wealth and without his family, with the exception of his wife. Then in round two, Satan again is speaking before God and accusing Job, saying, well, we took everything away and Job hasn't cursed God. He would if we touched his body, his health. And so God says, so you can't kill him, but you could take away his health. And so in round 2, Job loses his health. And he's covered with boils, and he scrapes them with pottery, the sherds of pottery, and he laments the day that he is born. That's the story that takes us up to the point where the dialogue with the friends begins to happen. The 3 friends are there, and their argument, by and large, is that man's suffering is proportionate to his disobedience. Each round brings more accusation and more criticism. So every time one of the friends gets another chance to speak, they double down on the argument from before. So they start out, they say some amazing things about what Job has done in his life, the picture of righteousness. And then they say, well, there must have been some kind of sin to bring this upon you. And then by the end, they can't remember any of the good things that Job has done. They're just piling on. There must be horrible things that you have done, because look at the horrors that God is bringing you through. It must be judgment for your disobedience. And every time Job offers a defense, until finally he's saying, man, if I could just talk with God, I would gird up my loins and I would have one argument with him about whether or not I deserve the kind of suffering here that his friends especially are accusing him of. So that's the dialogue. It takes up the majority of the book. And then along comes Elihu, and his character, he's not mentioned before or after. His character is kind of a transitional figure. So I don't know if he's meant to be funny or not, but he's kind of a comic relief, a break between what the friends have been very caustic about saying toward the end about Job and then hearing God's response. So we have this character in the middle, and you can decide for yourself how much you really think Elihu adds to the discussion. So when God finally does answer, he gives an answer to Job first, and then he gives an answer to Job's friends. To Job, he asks Job a whole series of questions coming straight out of creation, coming straight out of nature, displaying his wisdom, displaying his creativity. He says, where were you when I? And then there's a whole list of things that God has made. And he points to different things in creation and says, well, tell me the wisdom behind that. Tell me how that works. When you tell me about how that works, then I'll tell you how suffering works. That's kind of the argument. So to Job, he underscores his sovereignty with the idea that, Job, you have been right about who you are, and you have been right about who I am, but you're going to have to leave it there, because in my sovereignty, I do as I please, according to my own character. And so that is actually a delight for those of us who follow Christ, because we know God's character, and we know that everything ultimately and finally works together for good. So that's God's answer to Job. And then to Job's friends, God gives a kind of judgment. You have not spoken of me what is right. So for your healing, you need to go take a sacrifice to Job, and Job will pray for you, and then I will not deal with you according to your folly. So the friends are judged because they will condemn their friend in order to uphold their thesis of proportionate suffering. And God says the thesis is wrong, and you have been pretty rough on my servant Job. And so Job prays, and his friends are then healed. So we get to that final restoration section that's in the book of Job. And this is that prose section where Job's fortunes are restored when he prays for his friends. The passage says that Job gets twice as much as he had before. So all of the things that were listed in the beginning as his wealth are now doubled at the end. The only thing that is not doubled is his children, but he has another set. And so together, the ones who have passed on, who will wait for him in heaven, and the ones who are born under this restoration, that means Job has double the family that he had. So God is restoring twice as much as before. And then there is the restoration of relations. It says all of his friends, not just the three that we've been wrestling with, but the friends that might have been scared to get anywhere close to Job during this time for fear the lightning was going to hit them too. But they come and they are at rest. They come and show sympathy to Job. They come and show comfort. They even bring gifts to restore the relationships. And so Job is restored to the position that he had before. He has 7 more sons, 3 daughters. And in this case, it says those 3 daughters are more beautiful than any other daughters. And they are given an inheritance that is equal to the sons. The book concludes that Job dies an old man and full of days. That means a rich and full life of displaying faithfulness in the midst of incredible suffering in order to stay faithful to the God he loves. I think that's an awesome picture. And so I don't know that Job gets a lot of technical answers to the questions that we raised earlier, but maybe God himself is the answer that Job was looking for. So thanks for hanging out. Hope this was a help in your understanding of the book of Job, and we'll talk again soon.